Stephen Lawlor. My name is Siobhan Hyde, and we're here in Stephen's studio, Grand Studio in Drumcondra, and just to talk to Stephen today, ask him some questions about his exhibition currently rolling at the Oliver Sears Gallery called Some Untidy Spot. So first I'd like to thank you for your time.
Not at all.
Okay, so the first question I'd like to ask you, Stephen, is how would you define style? It is evident from your earlier work that it's unmistakably yours. What defines that? Is that style?
I think it is style. I think most artists, whether they want to or like to or plan to, acquire a way of working, and that sort of defines you in many ways. And I know that I've been interviewed in, by other publications and stuff about how my own style came about, and I think in them I outlined the fact that as a young person I loved the old master paintings and how they got the light especially into them, and so I would go off on acquisition tours to collect elements from within those paintings and then put them together in various concoctions, not necessarily as I found them, but and then light them in a certain way. So sort of a lighting cameraman on a film would have the same feel for it. So it creates drama, really. It's not necessarily real, but one after a while gets a feel for what works and what doesn't work. And then my interest was in early Renaissance painting where there's a two-dimensional quality, where they hadn't quite mastered perspective. So when the light is combined with that idea of a two-dimensional space rather than a three-dimensional space, you have this slight tension between depth and light and colour and form, and all those things combined I love to play with. Some wander off into abstraction and some remain fairly figurative. Some come from the real world and some come from those stolen elements from the masters.
Okay, you've raced ahead on my questionnaire. Okay, thank you. So reflecting on it's 2 works, 2 years that you said it took to compile all the work.
That's correct, yeah.
Is it you who selects it, or does the curatorial director take over at that point to select the show? Yeah,
I mean the gallery owner, Oliver Sears, I'm close to Oliver, so he and I went through them at actually 3 or 4 separate stages from the, early on and then through the, we met about 4 times over those 2 years, and because the work radically altered as time went on, we had to shelve what we had already decided might be, a way forward, and I put to him that I felt that we should actually include some of the early works, some of the middle works, and some of the later works, although there is a variety. When I say of style, it is probably of style because the painting did change. Although it feels the same, it looks different, and my approach to it was a bit different. And so, yeah, we discussed, I had 2 or 3 other people in, gallery people and artists in, to talk to me about what they felt might be, the best paintings to choose. It's a very difficult thing to do, including Hughie O'Donoghue, who came to interview me here, and he, his insight into painting is wonderful. So, you take advice from various people, and from what they have to say, you make a decision, and I'm happy enough with it. I wish I had had more time, but it doesn't always work like that.
Okay. Reading your artist statement with your press release from Oliver Sears Gallery said that you looked through the lens of canonical paintings and the old masters. And my question around that was, how do you approach that? Do you read biographies of the masters, or do you simply study their work and take reference from there?
Both, because once you, it's quite strange. I put together a database for myself, and that means I've a very good collection of books. I sort of justify the purchase of them by saying I might get a painting out of even one image, and a lot of the times I don't, but I scan them into the computer, and therefore I have a scanned database going listed in time and also listed in place, as in Northern Europe or Southern Europe or Italian, French, and so on. And it's funny, if I sift through them on a day when I start painting with a blank canvas, I will find something I'm interested in, I will paint it from the computer screen, my version or a very quick rendering of what's there, study I suppose, and generally that doesn't work. So I would choose another one and paint it directly on top of the already wet version of the earlier one. And I wipe it, if I'm putting white over dark, I might wipe some away, or conversely, dark over light, so it doesn't get too muddy. But the muddiness then adds to the confusion and the ambiguity that's created between one image and another. Yeah. Sometimes it might even go to 3 or 4 images on top of each other. Sometimes it might stretch out for weeks or even months that the images are on there, but whatever actually ends up on top has no relation to what's underneath. And those things then all feed through to create the final image.
Okay.
So I like to see accident happening, and in wet paint that is really very possible. In fact, it's unavoidable.
Excellent. Yeah, I can see that. So that leads on to, I was going to ask you, do you actually go out on plein air?
Apart from being eaten alive by mosquitoes out there, the forest has this wonderful, cathedral-like feel about it, with the light coming through the trees. Wonderful.
Yeah, so you made a series of screen prints. A whole
exhibition and screen prints afterwards.
Yeah, I remember those.
I kind of worked for nearly 2 years on that alone, and they were really successful in Sweden, because I think with the whole modern art conceptualism, Swedish people hadn't seen just images of their countryside, and they do take their forest for granted there. Okay. There's a lot of forest, and it's very beautiful. The older sections especially. Yeah. Yeah.
So moving back to Ireland, so in Ireland the art community is very small. How have you navigated that over the years?
Well, I think I carved out a small niche for myself, making prints and distributing prints to various countries and around Ireland, and they had this sort of appeal. They're very different to everything else that was around the place, with their sort of old master feel about them. But I mean, the Irish art establishment is very much a closed institution, really, between the RHA and the Ace Donna and all those, the Arts Council. I think I've done okay, but I've always felt I'm on the peripheries of it, and so what can one do? You try not to be, you try to just get on with what you make and be professional about it, and don't think too much about it, because I think it's a separate part of an artist's life, the politics, apart from the selling and the promotion, which is another equally difficult part, and you would hope galleries would do it all for you, but they don't always.
No. So speaking of your printmaking, can you talk about the transition of working in a community print studio to working then on your own, isolated as a painter?
Yeah, and from 1983 I joined Graphic Studio in 1983, and for the best part of 20 years at least, spent most of my time in that studio, and you get used to being part of an institution and knowing the people coming and going and working with people around you. It didn't bother me. In fact, you never knew any different. So when I started painting, I knew I needed my own studio. When I got my own studio, it was very exciting and great, liberating feeling to get to grips with making the work painting as opposed to making prints as well, a different medium. But the isolation, of course, hits you like a ton of bricks after a few weeks, and you feel that you're it's very difficult. Very difficult to go on day after day, not knowing, not having the connection with other artists. I mean, they would casually, as you know yourself, walk past your work in the graphic studio and say, "Oh, that needs a bit more blue or something," and the one in the middle. And so you get used to that sharing of feedback and sharing of knowledge and of attitude. And you know what some people like and they don't like, and others that whose word you would take very seriously, and other people's who you would ignore. All those things, I think, form part of a community, which I miss actually in painting.
And you are missed, in fact.
Yeah.
A great contributor to the graphic studio over the years.
Yeah,
Stephen.
well, I miss it.
Even from a personal point of view.
I miss it.
So finally, I'd just like to ask your opinion on some of the points made in Louise Parsons' paper on critical theory and visual practice in the art school. She says that only when an individual engages with the work that it becomes whole. Without the spectator, the work is dead, and goes on to say that the work then has a new set of meanings that weren't the intention of the maker.
I agree with that completely. In fact, in the discussion with Huey O'Donoghue here, Huey pointed out that he felt that the engagement, between the viewer and the painting was a separate thing, but the painting couldn't have any meaning unless it created that connection between the viewer and the piece, the painting itself. And the intention of the artist, by the way, isn't always apparent, because even the artist himself hasn't got control over it. Unless you're a very kind of steady, sort of, solid person who creates things in a rigid way, giving the same effect every time, like an academic approach to making art.
Yes.
Where I think that's, if you make art that is true, that is real from your, from your soul, as it were. I don't mean to sound, tree hugging about that, but if you engage with the medium and allow things to happen. Things happen that are subliminal. You don't really mean them, but they come out anyway.
Yes.
And things in your memory, you might imbue the painting with, and it might be something you just saw very quickly or vaguely, or something that happened 20 years ago, a painting you saw, and it's only with when you see it yourself afterwards that you kind of realise you actually did put that in, or maybe you did, or maybe you didn't. And sometimes people point out to you, what they see in it. You never saw it, but you realise, Jesus, maybe they have a point. It's there. Mm. So I think the medium itself allows for that fluidity of not just in vision, but in meaning.
Excellent. Yeah.
So.
And then finally, the final question. She cites Julia Kristeva's understanding of artists as agents of change, that the arts give us an opportunity to invent new ways of thinking and seeing. Yes.
Well, that's equally important, because if you're not inventing a new way of thinking and seeing, you're just regurgitating. And if you're regurgitating, then I don't see the point, I think it can be quite simple. I always admired, everybody knows Picasso's veracity, of his ability to engulf and devour and then spit it over his shoulder anybody else's work. And the evil question he was asked one time, do you not feel guilty copying or taking things from other artists? And he said, I only steal when there's something worth stealing. So if he sees something that in an artist's work that he admires or likes, he has to own it. The only way to own it is to physically actually remake it yourself in your own way. There's no point in looking at it and then considering its value or meaning and then trying to you need to physically engage, and once you physically reach, it's another level. That physical engagement is a level that I think transcends the concept, because you've gone beyond thinking. You're now sort of in there physically and mentally, and it becomes very personal. And so what you thought you liked in the beginning, sometimes you think, actually it's crap. It doesn't work for me. I can't absorb it. I can't use it. And other times you have a half notion that you think something is interesting, and then you'll take it and you realise, oh my God, I know now I should have looked at this much sooner, because it is allowing me to do this, it allows me to do this, and you start moving in various ways. So apart from the old masters, I think I have been influenced by many contemporary painters who are very wonderful, and their approach obviously is far more modern and far less structured or less rigid in its approach, So what was the question again?
That was the question answered. A different way of thinking and seeing.
Yes, the result should be, I think, though, something that refreshes people when they see it. Oh my God, there's something that you wouldn't expect, and it's wonderful to see. I like making paintings that last in time. There's no point making something that initially, impresses people, and then they, after a few weeks they look at it and they go, oh, there it is again.
Yeah, it's something you never tire of.
But it's got to be deeper.
Yes.
Not only do you not tire of it, it gets better with time. Like a good book or a good story or a good film, it retains its strength, and that strength actually, especially with visual art, especially with I think probably painting more than anything else. That value of the object, which has layer upon layer of meaning and layer upon layer of giving emotionally all the time, and depending on your mood or the day, the light on that day, or what's happening, it will give you something else. Great.
fantastic way to end the interview. I just want to thank you, Stephen, for your time.